Welcome to Heart Art. We are going to make our very own pumpkin patch with construction paper, crayons, and glue today. To begin with this project, I use black construction paper. Doesn't matter what weight or style, all forms will do. If you'd like, you can even get black cardstock so it's a little heftier paper. Get a regular pencil, and we're going to start by drawing out our grass. And I try and vary where it's at for each student so that way not everybody's paper looks the same. I tell the students to try and stay at least below the halfway mark so that way it doesn't get too high. They also have the choice if they want to add one row of grass or a second one, depending on how many pumpkins they're thinking of doing. And we discussed the pumpkins earlier that we like to have an odd number of them. I try not to start in the middle of my paper with a pumpkin so that way they don't have a main focal point right in the middle of their pumpkin patch, that they are spread out and randomized by size and shape and location. And then after they're done with their odd number of pumpkins, they're allowed to go back and add in a second layer of grass if they need to, or third, depending on their location, because we don't want any pumpkins that are floating in the air. After they're done with that, then we start to divide up our pumpkins into the sections so it looks like a real pumpkin. And again, it's up to them how many lines they put in it, but they know that each line they make is going to have glue put on it. And when you use glue, it does spread. So if your lines are too close, then you probably won't be able to add as many lines with the glue. And then that becomes a problem because not all of the lines you've drawn have glue on them then. And students are a little disappointed when that happens, or they spread together and you get one giant blob. After you get done drawing your sections, you're going to go ahead and add the stems and the vines. And we try and make sure the stems are not perfect rectangles, that they're slanted or curved, and that if they want to add the vines, they're making little curly cues or piggy tails is what I call them, things like that, just to add a little bit of interest. Again, if they add too many and then the glue starts to spread, they will be disappointed. So they need to think ahead. All right, so the next portion is the glue bottle, and I use Elmer's regular glue, nothing special. It generally dries clear. If the students put it on a little too thick, it won't dry as clear. So try and remind them to keep even lines. You don't want any blobs or splotches or drips if you can help it, but if it does happen, it's okay. Do not wipe it off. Do not try and fix blobs and things like that, because then it leaves this trail of glue behind. You'll never get it all off. And then when you go to color, sometimes the crayons do not want to work on top of that glue as well, and you will notice. So it's better to have the little tiny blob or accidental droplet and say that it's rain or a star or some dew or something on the pumpkin, whatever. Maybe the pumpkin's got a wart, something, instead of trying to wipe it off and smearing this huge section of your paper. So I tell the students to start with the outline of the pumpkin and the outline of the grass if they can, and that way then they can choose what other lines they're going to add glue. I prefer for them to add glue to every single line they have made with the pencil, but this is not always possible. Some students make their pumpkins a little too close or a little too small, or they just have a really heavy hand when they're doing the glue and it spreads too much. And so we have to take that into consideration as we're making. And the students will learn. They pick this up pretty quickly, but sometimes it just happens so fast that they can't monitor it as quickly as they would like. And so they're going to learn from it. And the next time they do a project like this, they'll understand where they can put glue and where they can't put glue and where they can put lines and where they can't. So this is definitely a learning environment, and they will have a learning curve. So kind of go with the flow at this point. And it's up to them if they don't use certain lines when the glue dries. If they would like to erase some of it, they can. That's totally fine as well. But again, I prefer to do as much glue lines as possible because I think it makes the product look a lot nicer in the end, and the students are generally happier with their project in the end if they have more glue on it than less glue. So have fun with this part, and then we'll move on to the coloring next. All right, so this next part is where we use the Crayola construction paper crayons. And these construction paper crayons are made specifically, obviously, for construction paper. And I feel like they have like a white base in them, so that way the students can actually use them on top of any colored paper. So if you didn't choose black construction paper like I did, it's okay. It will work on any colored paper. If you use the red crayon on red paper, you're not going to see it as much, but you still will see it more so than you would a normal crayon, and that's the whole point. So to start with, I'm showing you here where I used just a regular orange yellow on the pumpkin, and I made sure that we discussed coloring up and down all one direction with the pumpkin, so that way they didn't have a bunch of scribble lines. And we started with one pumpkin so that way we could focus on our blending techniques and trying to make it look like it goes from light to dark. So we wanted a glare in the middle of our pumpkin, so that way there was a shadow at the bottom, so I used a darker orange at the bottom. And then I also used a darker orange at the top, so that way it looked like it was rounded. But I tried to make sure I got the bottom done first and then moved on to the top so the students weren't confused. Then if we wanted to, you could take a yellow or a white and add that to the middle and help blend. You can also go back with the yellow orange. It's up to you. I think at one point I even used a little bit of the dark red at the top so that way it would pop it even more and make it really stand out. Now, I also let the students, for example, students were allowed to choose if they would rather have pink pumpkins or blue pumpkins or purple pumpkins. They just had to start with a lighter color in the middle and then have a darker color at the top and at the bottom. We also used a white crayon in the middle where I just used the yellow orange, and that helped their colors pop a little bit more. So our order of events was we did a white stripe in the middle, then if they wanted a pinkish red pumpkin, they would use pink in the middle, and then they would use pinkish red at the top and the bottom, and then we would go back with the pink and we would blend those together to make it look like it faded. And that worked out really well. Students could choose however many colored pumpkins they wanted, or they could just do one, or they could do normal colors. Then they were allowed to also do that with their stems. If they wanted to do brown ones, or maybe their pink pumpkin had a pink stem, it was up to them. Then we moved on to the grass, as you see here, and I like to use the yellow first, and then we went to a yellow green, and then we went to a turquoise. And so we slowly got darker as we went back in the space of the picture. So from the foreground in the front, we did yellow. For the middle ground, we did that yellow green. And then for the background, we did turquoise. And we would go back in and we would hash things up, but meaning that I would take some of the yellow from the front and put it back on the turquoise. And I would take some of the turquoise and I would put it on the front and the yellow. Because like we discussed, grass is never perfect unless you are on a golf field or a baseball field or something like that for some kind of sport. They're not going to be perfect. This is a pumpkin patch and the colors are going to be mixed and blended and things like that. So after we got done with this, they were allowed to kind of play around with their colors and mix and blend and kind of get used to the idea that one color is not what makes a picture. You want to have your picture be unique. You want it to have mixed colors. You want it to go from light to dark when there's different lights coming from different places. You don't want it to be normal. We want it to be extraordinary. We want it to be exceptional. We want it to be unique for our own. So they were supposed to play around with that. Then afterwards, they were also allowed to choose for their sky, whether they wanted a night sky or a day sky. And we discussed that in the country, it's a little bit different than the city. So for the city, if you've ever looked at the city lights, they glow at the top of the buildings. And so the night sky is actually lighter at the bottom and darker at the top. Whereas if you live in the country, you'll notice that the stars are brighter. And so it's actually lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. So students were allowed to choose which way they wanted it if they were doing a night sky. And so we went from gray to blue to purple, depending on which direction you wanted to go. We chose that lighter was the gray and the darker was the purple with how the crayons were showing up on the black paper, but that may be different on someone else's paper. If you have a different color paper as like a purple one or something like that, it may change for you. We also decided if we wanted to do a sunset, you could go either direction, but we decided to start with yellows and then go to yellow orange, then orange, and then a red orange, and then if you wanted, you could even go up to a pink and a purple, just depending on how much night sky you actually had or day sky. you actually had, the space-wise, actually determined how many colors you could use. I asked all the students to at least blend 3 colors and to try and make sure they all went up and down, which this is difficult when you get the stems and you get all of the different flourishes that students have put on there with the glue or any accidental droplets, things like that, depending on if they added a second row of grass, some of their pumpkins might be tall. So it just kind of depends on what they did and what they added and where they added, how difficult this is. But I did grade on 1, did they blend their colors, and 2, did they try and color up and down for the most part, because this is something new for them. A lot of students color all different directions and try and fill in the space the best they can, and then their picture doesn't look as cohesive. So we really were looking for that unified piece where everything went one direction and you could actually tell what was going on. So at this point in the video, I've got my grass done almost, and the pumpkins done, and then we're going to move into the night sky. I hope this video is helpful. Definitely leave comments below on things that might help out more. I know this video is a little bit longer than my normal ones. I hope you have a super Halloween and a fantastic day. Thank you for watching.